I had a thought on the way up here. I don't think I've ever had before, at least not in the exact way I did today. So I want to try and share it with you guys. There's a phenomena in our tradition, and I think it's indicative, or it's an example of a larger phenomenon that you find in spiritual circles. So I want to talk about our particular, sect, and our history and our tradition. But I think that it's an example of a much larger principle that you're going to see everywhere you look in spiritual circles. In spiritual circles of a certain level of depth. One of our core texts, called the Upadeshamrit, which was written about just under 5 centuries ago. So it's be a medieval piece of literature. It was written by one of our framers, one of the early exegetes, one of the early savant Vaishnavas, who was part of the codifying of our theology 5 centuries ago, mining from a number of hundreds of different texts going back thousands of years. They put it together during this Renaissance period in a way that was compelling for tens of millions of people ultimately, and that formed our particular Renaissance Bhakti movement upsurge in West Bengal that spread all over the world. So he wrote a text called the Upadesh Amrit, the Nectar of Instruction. We translated; it's available, and there was a period of time in the 70s where somehow or other it was quasi-legal if your kid became a Hare Krishna, that you could hire somebody to kidnap them and deprogram them. So the idea was you were programmed, you're brainwashed. Of course, Srila Prabhupada, when he heard this accusation, he said, they should be grateful that we're washing their brains. You have to pay to wash your car. We're washing their brains for free. They should be grateful. But there was this accusation of brainwashing, and then that led to deprogramming. And so you could hire people, and they would kidnap your kid, who wasn't a kid, they were an adult. So you could hire people to kidnap a loved one, and they would send a group of men there to tackle you and throw you in a car, and they would drive you to a remote location and try to feed you meat and try to get you to smoke weed or drink alcohol. And try to they'd bring in girls, I'm assuming sex workers, for you to sleep with, and they would put a lot of effort into. They put a lot of effort into engaging you in vices. And then they would also put up pictures of Hare Krishna saints and throw darts at them. And I'm being figurative there. The other stuff I'm being literal. But that they would insult and kind of blaspheme our tradition and try to get people to just go back to their own old ways. It's just insane now. I mean, it was actually it was illegal, and eventually these guys got prosecuted, and we came out of the dark ages. But different governments got involved. The Supreme Court of New York got involved, and also the English High Court, whatever that's called. But they were studying the Hare Krishna tradition to figure out whether we were a cult or not, and they found this book from 500 years ago. And when they gave their conclusion, they rendered their verdict, they adjudicated the case and gave their final conclusion, determined that we weren't a cult. They said, if you want to understand the Hare Krishna movement, you can read this book, and this book gives you a synopsis of their entire tradition. And it was the Upadeshamrit, which is 12 verses. It's super tight. It's super terse and minimalist. And they said this one book will illustrate the Hare Krishna belief system. Of course, that text, like I said, was a distillation of thousands of years of our tradition. But there's a whole structure to the text is quite brilliant in the way it's laid out. But one thing they do, which is quite formulaic, is they say all the things you should do, and they say all the things you should not do. And so on the list of things you should do, it's the second verse. It says Utsaha Nischaya Dharyat. It lists 6 things, and it says Sadbir Bhakti Prasiddhyati, that by these things bhakti is achieved, by these 6 things. So the first one is that you have to have utsaha, which means you have to be enthusiastic. Utsaha, nischaya dharyat. You have to be dharya, you have to be patient, and you also have to be nischaya, you have to be certain, determined, perseverant, patient, enthusiastic. These 3 terms. So you have to be enthusiastic, determined, and patient. 3 things. There's 3 more, but I'm not going to get into those. But then the very next verse says there's 6 things you have to avoid. Sadbir bhakti vinashati, and these 6 things destroy bhakti. And one of those 6 things is prayas. Prayas. Atyahaya prayasascha prajalpo niyamagraha. So there's this list of 6 things, and one of them, the second one, is prayas. And prayas means exertion. So this is unusual, because the list of 6 things you have to have is determined, patient, enthusiastic effort. And then the very next verse says you have to avoid overexertion. Do you guys see the contradiction? It may not be a straight contradiction, like go up, go down, but it's not too far away from that. You have to be enthusiastic, determined, patient, but patient here means steadfast. And so it's like this, you get this marathon runner mentality. And on the other hand, you guys know who David, is it Goggins? Goggins? It's Goggins, right? David Goggins is he's a ex, I think, Navy SEAL or something, who runs hundreds of miles and does thousands of pull-ups. And his whole thing is, balance is for idiots. You got to go for the greatness. Only when you're out on the very edge of sanity will you find yourself. And I saw something showed up on my Instagram feed today. It was Elon Musk, a cartoon version of Elon Musk was on a plane with like a bunch of rich people, and they're saying, okay, we're going to go to Mars now. And they were saying, we're going to be the first people ever to step foot on Mars. And they stepped off their spacecraft, and David Goggins was there running across Mars. And they were like, hey, David Goggins, how'd you get here? And he said, I ran, fool, 34 million miles. I'm on my way to Jupiter next. Stay hard. That's his tagline. So you get this kind of David Goggins-esque determination, perseverance, enthusiasm in the face of all adversity. And on the next verse, you're told, Don't. Prayas comes. It means don't exert yourself. Prayas indicates intense exertion from the Sanskrit root yas, which means to exert. Prayas, especially like strongly exert yourself. So how is it that you can be enthusiastic and perseverant and determined and steadfast at the same time? You shouldn't try too hard. Did you follow this? You raising your hand to answer my question? It was rhetorical. I mean, that was pretty clear. Maybe you're on Mars with David Goggins, but I don't. 100 people, maybe one of them would think I was looking for an answer. Even you were doubting yourself because you gave me like one of these. So even you knew you weren't right. You were just excited to speak yourself, and you wanted to hear the sound of your own voice. You weren't really thinking, I want an answer. But all right, you've been around for a minute. You've earned the right. If you want to hear the sound of your own voice, what do you got?
It's okay.
Yeah, sorry. That we're past that. Spotlight's on you now, kiddo.
I was going to say you could put a lot of exertion into something that's totally useless and not actually moving it forward.
Yeah, but that goes against the verse. The verse doesn't say exertion towards material things versus exertion towards spiritual things. It doesn't say that. Also, given that everything ultimately comes from the absolute, then where's the line of demarcation between material and spiritual? That seems to be a relatively arbitrary line. Because you pick up your beads and chant, is that a material endeavor? You build a temple, is that necessarily a spiritual endeavor? Taking care of your family, who's also devotees, is that necessarily a material endeavor? And that line between what is spiritual and material in the life of a devotee gets blurred tremendously. So you could add that as an easy solve, but it doesn't, that you don't honor the text by saying that, because the text doesn't specify that. Okay. So, I think we have a straight contradiction here. There's nothing that gets us out of jail for free and makes it easy on us. And in fact, there's a famous saying, Vaishnaver Kriya Mudra Vigyena Bhujoy, that even a learned person cannot understand the activities of a devotee, of a Vaishnava. It's somewhat mysterious. So anyway, today's class is an attempt to unpack that mystery. And I think it's significantly more complete than your answer, which I think maybe if you were given more in the verse, you could say what you want to say, but I don't think it actually honors the level of depth we're going to go to. So, again, we have a verse that says you should be enthusiastic and determined and steadfast. And the next verse says don't over-endeavor. And in fact, we find another verse elsewhere that's well known that says you can't understand. It's very difficult. Even learned people don't understand the movements of devotees. Okay, so I think that when you look at our Vedic literatures, different texts, and I'm going to quote one verse from the Mahabharata, that's in the Gita, and another verse from the Ramayana today, and I want to go through them with you relatively quickly. But when we go through these verses, a certain fundamental principle is going to be revealed, and that fundamental principle resolves this contradiction. So I'm going to give you these next two verses. They're general verses. They're important verses. I'm going to explain them to you. And then we're going to try to apply those verses to this, what now is at least a contradiction, an apparent contradiction. And we're going to try to resolve it. When you resolve a contradiction, it's called a paradox. If you can't resolve it, it's called a contradiction. So I think these verses are paradoxical. I don't think they're fundamentally contradictory. I do think the verses we're about to explore hold the key to resolving them. Did you guys follow this? So let's say it again. Listen, if you were spacing out, it's not going to work for you tonight. And generally speaking, it's a bad idea to space out my classes. But especially now, because we're going to go over a number of things and we got to put them all together. So again, first thing we learn, what's the first thing we're taught in this text that I just quoted from? What's the first positive statement? What should you do? Somebody, tell me. Enthusiastic and somebody else. Patient and determined, right? Okay, that's one thing. That's one universe of things. Then the next verse tells you don't what? Overexert yourself, right? And that seems to form something of a contradiction, okay? And then we're also told separately it's very difficult to understand a devotee's behavior. And now there's two verses, one from the Mahabharata, one from the Ramayana, and I think those two verses hold the key for unlocking this paradox so that it becomes a paradox and isn't just a straight contradiction. You following this, Austin? All right. Stay sharp. You'll follow this. The first verse, very famous verse in the Gita, Krishna says, Sarva Dharman Parityajya. Parityajya. Give up. What should you give up? Sarva Dharma. Sarva Dharma means what, Ishwar? All Dharma. Sarva Dharma Parityajya. Parityajya. Give up all Dharma. Give up all Dharma. Mamekam sharanam braja. Go, take shelter of me. Do one thing, take shelter of me. Aham tvam sarvapapebhyo mokshayishami. I will liberate you. Krishna says literally, mokshayishami is future tense, first person. I will liberate you. What will I liberate you from? Sarvapapebhya. From all pop. Pop means sin, difficulty, vice. I will liberate you from all difficulty. Aham tvam, I to you. Aham means I, tvam means you. I will liberate you from all difficulty. Mashuchaha, don't worry. Give up all varieties of dharma, surrender unto me fully, and I will deliver you from all difficulties. Do not fear. That's verse number 1 from the Gita. Verse number 2. Sakrid eva prapana yaha. A person who one time approaches me. Tavasmiti chayachate, and prays, I am yours. Tavasmi means yours I am. Tavasmiti is quotation marks. The et is quotation marks. So the verse is literally saying, pray this. It's telling you the sentence to pray. A person who approaches me, this is Ram speaking, a person who approaches me one time and says, prays, I'm yours. Then, what is it? Abhayam sarvada tasmai. And then, Abhayam sarvada tasmai. Dadami ekam mamavratam. My vow to you, so this is God speaking, my vow to you, if you approach me one time and say I'm yours, my vow to you is I will deliver you from all fears. I will personally give you fearlessness in all circumstances. I will make you fearless in all circumstances. So, verse number 1, don't worry, give up all dharma, which is a weird statement to happen in a Hindu text. Give up all dharma, just surrender to me, I will deliver you from all difficulty. Don't worry. Second text, I will give you fearlessness in every circumstance of life. Sarva, that means in all circumstances. Dadami, I'll personally give it to you. Abhayam tasmai. I will personally give to you abhay, fear, freedom from fear, in all circumstances. Mama vratam, etat mama vratam. This is my vow. If you sakradeva prapana, if you just one time approach me, tavasmiti chayachache, and you say to me, I'm yours. And that word tavasmi is in the Manavadharma Shastras, the Indian legal texts from thousands of years ago. This text is from thousands of years ago. Both these texts are from thousands of years ago. And this statement, tavasmi, I am yours. Let's all say it together. Tavasmi. Tavasmi. Tava asmi becomes tavasmi. I'm yours. And so this term, tavasmi, is in Indian legal texts from thousands of years ago, and it's the term used for military surrender, when one party turns himself over to another party and then enjoys prisoner of war laws. Like there was like a Geneva Convention type stuff was there in ancient Indian law that you had to feed and care for and give medical attention to your enemies if they surrendered to you. If they said to you, I'm yours, then they become your wards and you become responsible for them. Just like if you surrender to the state, they have to feed you and take care of you if you're going to be imprisoned or something like that. And just like, after World War I and the horrific treatment of prisoners of war in World War I. There's a thing called the Geneva Convention. You guys may be familiar with it if you studied U.S. or world history. And it was where they came up with rules of how to treat prisoners of war. Name, rank, and serial number. You can't force them in interrogation. They used to, it used to be that, you had to get a confession. And so you just beat it out of somebody. But then at some point they realized if you beat somebody up physically, they're going to confess to whatever you tell them to confess to. And recently they discovered if you beat somebody up verbally and mentally long enough, you break them, and they'll confess to whatever you want them to. But anyway, if you say I'm yours, then you're required to give protection to that POW, prisoner of war, and that's the same language used in this multi-thousand-year-old text. Which 500 years ago, when our tradition was framing out what is bhakti, they dug this text up and they quoted it alongside their own texts to demonstrate kind of a family of teachings that had been there forever, that they were explicating, that they were explaining, that they were codifying, but it wasn't like they were inventing it. It was already there. They were drawing it out and making it easy to understand and collecting it and putting it into a garland that you could wear, a teaching you could assimilate, so you didn't have to study thousands of texts over hundreds of years. They did it for you, and they put together this composite work, which was the distillation of thousands of years of texts. So let's put this all together, and I'm about to ask you a non-rhetorical question. So here's what we're putting together. On one hand, we're told, be super enthusiastic, work real hard, be super determined. On the other hand, we're told, don't overexert yourself. And then we're told, yeah, it's really difficult to understand what Vaishnavas are doing. And now we got two verses. Verse number 1 is, if you surrender unto me and give up everything else you do in life and just surrender to me, I will personally take care of you. This is God speaking, an omnipotent, omnibenevolent deity. And then verse number 2 is, if you just approach me and say, I'm yours, I'll take responsibility for giving you fearlessness, for carrying you through in all times, and therefore making you fearless, because it's my vow that I'll take care of you. Those two verses that I just paraphrased for maybe the 5th time hold the key to understanding the contradiction that we first outlined. Do you see it? I'll call on you last and nobody else gets it. Yeah. Yeah.
Bhakti involves help from the divine, so exertion alone can't get you that, but determination can.
I think that's a great point. I think it's excellent. I think it's a great start. The idea of bhakti, which is articulated in these verses, indicates that you are under divine shelter, you're being helped from above. And so the critique of the first one is not by your own endeavor, but it's by grace, along with works. And so the second verse saying don't overexert yourself is saying don't overexert yourself on your own without grace. Okay, I think it's an important point. I don't think it's everything, but I think we're getting somewhere. We're starting. Who wants to add, or you can go to a totally different direction. You can add to what she said. It's fine. Yeah.
Structure, it seems like the two verses that you quoted contain the two halves of the Upadeshamrita verses, where the surrender part would relate to having patience, being determined, and then the fearlessness would be relating to giving up your dharma or over endeavoring.
That's excellent. I didn't think of that. Super brilliant. I'm way impressed. I'm feeling like I was accidentally brilliant because I said that, but what you just said was really good. He's making the point that the verses I spoke about had two features. One is what you give up, and the other was what you do. What you do is surrender to Krishna. What you give up is your own endeavors. And the Upadeshamrita also spoke about what you do and what you don't do. And so he saw a positive and negative feature of both the verses I quoted, and then he saw that there was a positive and negative feature of the Upadeshamrita, and so he saw they were related thematically in that they all had positive and negative elements. Great. You don't have to say both verses, one was positive, one was negative, because actually both verses have both elements. You're approaching me. That's what you're doing. You're saying, I'm yours. That's giving up. Now I'm taking responsibility for you. Other one, you're giving up all dharma, and then you're taking shelter of me. That's negative and positive as well, and I'm taking responsibility for you. So it's three elements. There's what you give up, what you strive for, and then how Krishna jumps in and picks up the slack. And both verses have all three of those elements. And you're saying the Upadeshamrita has a positive and negative, and it flows together nicely. That's great too. Even better than what she said. I'm totally stunned by. I learned something from you here. I'm super impressed. Still not what I'm saying though. At least not fully. But I'm impressed, and it's a great addition to what we're talking about. Who's got more to add? He's going to be a tough act to follow. I'm even feeling like, wow, that was really impressive. Who's got something to add? Come on. I don't care if you repeat. It doesn't bother me if you repeat. Yeah.
The Krishna said, having taken shelter of me, have faith or don't worry that you won't be in a desperate situation that you would have to overexert yourself.
Okay, have faith in me, then you don't have to overexert yourself because I'm going to have your back, right? That's excellent. It's good. It's in line with what they're saying, and it's you said it in your own voice, and it was good. It's excellent. Nice point as well. Come on. You're all devotees. You should all be able to answer this question. I already gave you permission. You can be repetitive. Jump in. Let's go. Cat got your tongue? What's the matter? All of a sudden you don't have anything to say? Couldn't control yourself before, but now that you're being called on, you can't say anything? Let's go, guys. Who's got something to say? I'll sketch you in a second. I see you up there, dude. You're wondering if you should speak or not. Just say something.
Being determined and enthusiastic will give you the strength and the fearlessness to be able to do that.
Okay, that doesn't attack the actual conundrum, which is not overexerting yourself, but you do at least say, from grace, you'll get the strength to persevere, and so we'll be able to do the first one by grace, and that's how the verses are related to the first verse I quoted, right?
Yeah, I didn't have anything else.
That's okay. It's okay. I got it. That's why you didn't speak, because you have an actual resolution, but you did have something that contributed to at least part of it, right? In some ways, it highlights the contradiction, but still, now the surrender gives you that strength that helps you persevere when you couldn't go on your own, right? Excellent. What do you want to add, Dom? You don't have to say something. If you wanted to, you could.
I think when a devotee hears these promises of God and they believe in them, and they gain a faith which gives them a lot of enthusiasm to march forward on the path of devotion with a lot of faith and perseverance, and especially when they hear Krishna say, Ma Shuja, don't worry, I'll take care of you. They feel like they don't have to overexert themselves to figure things out on their own. They do their part, but then they leave the rest up to
I mean, I think that was the closest to where I want to go. And I think you added something very constructive to the conversation. And I'll get into it more in a second. But that was very good. What do you have to say?
I'm not sure if this will follow the same which you gave me before. But I'll try. This results by saying you can surrender, if you surrender unto Krishna with determination and patience and enthusiastically, that's that side, and the other part is anything else is not surrendering to Krishna.
I don't know what you said. It was a little too enigmatic for me. But you can think about it. I'll give you another bite from the apple in a minute. Who else wants to speak? Yeah. By the way, that whole raising your hand when I'm clearly on my soapbox obviously is not the way to win my favor. Just in case you didn't get that memo, I'm just gonna text you that one. Go ahead, JC. What do you got?
Over-endeavoring is sort of a litmus test. If you're over-endeavoring, then you may be striving for a result that is not Krishna's will. And so it's best to have
Under-endeavor?
to have a plan, but not to be attached to the result because Krishna might have another plan.
I think it was a little clumsy, but I think that just like Dom, you got to really the heart of what I want to talk about. What you got to do is resolve that what is over-endeavor, what is under-endeavor, what does it mean to have a plan, how does having a plan not mean over-endeavor, what exactly is that razor's edge? Because just by highlighting, essentially you're going, don't overexert yourself, surrender to Krishna. Go forward with Krishna, but don't work too hard. Krishna will take care of you, but you should really go for it, but don't work too hard. And all you're doing is highlighting the contradiction by just saying both parts of it. But if you say it with a lot of gusto, then people don't notice that you're really just creating the same contradiction. We need to resolve that contradiction. This is getting you percolating and thinking more deeply, right? That's fantastic. And so you made this mistake a little bit, but you were a little more slick, so I don't want to get on your case too much. You were just a little grotesque in how you did it, so I felt like I had to say something. But if we got a contradiction, the resolution has to actually take both horns and resolve them. Not just restate it a little smoother. Not just smooth it out a little bit while you say, yeah, you should go for it and give everything to Krishna and go for it, march forth, but not be so attached. And let it happen. And let Krishna decide what's going to happen. It sounds like that's a resolution, but there's a little lack of fineness there. You want to say something now?
Yeah, I don't think I can fully put it all together, but I'm especially thinking about you quoting how the body's activities are mysterious, and I'm trying to figure that out.
Good. That's great. That's the key. That was a little sub-key. Those two big verses were the key, and that last one was a sub-key.
I think I can go in the right direction.
We got a two-part lock, with the deadbolt up top and then the lock on the door itself. Go ahead. Say what you wanted.
I'm thinking of the Chinta Veda top.
No, don't just say that. That's just simultaneous, inconceivable, oneness and difference. It gets a little too foo-foo for today. Now, I will say this. My resolution is not intended to be merely logical. This resolution is intended to be somewhat artistic because I think we're dealing with something quite deep in our tradition, and therefore it's going to end up being a little bit artistic. And I may make some of the same mistakes you guys made. Feel free to critique me. But here's what I want to say. And let me just say it all again so you guys get it. We got verse 1, David Goggins, enthusiasm, determined, patience, go for it. Run to Mars, 34 million miles. Beat Elon Musk. And then run to Jupiter after that. Then number 2, don't over-endeavor. Don't overexert yourself. That seems like a contradiction. Yep, because it's impossible to understand the mood of a Vaishnava. It's very enigmatic. And now we got 2 verses. And what are those 2 verses? Surrender to Krishna, give up all other endeavors. Krishna will jump in and take care of you. What you do, what you give up, and where Krishna steps in. And now we're trying to figure out how those 2 verses and that little funky verse I threw in about it's difficult to understand the mood of a Vaishnava, the activities of a Vaishnava, how this holds a key. And here's what I was thinking of on my way up. Now you guys, I gave you some verses, and those verses kind of allow you a little bit of entrance into my mind and what I was thinking about as I was driving up. In spiritual circles, in many spiritual circles, there is a sense, there is an idea that you need to surrender or turn your life over to or take help from a higher power. I think theoretically you could have a spiritual tradition that didn't believe in a higher power, you were the highest power, but then by thinking of you as a higher power, then you surrender to your deepest part and you'd be in touch with a higher power, and it's just, there is no external to yourself higher power. So I think all spiritual circles have this idea that there's something spiritual, and that thing spiritual is bigger than matter, and therefore if you take shelter of the spiritual thing, you're above mere materialism, which is incomplete. Most forms of spirituality then involve this idea of a higher power that will assist you and help you. Here's the thing. Hey, that higher power, to be able to help you, has to be higher than you. Therefore, it has to be able to think. It has to be conscious. It has to be able to deal with reality on your behalf and assist you. It would be a lower power if it was incapable of thought. It would be a lower power if it was incapable of love. It would be a lower power if it couldn't actually do anything. The very idea of a higher power is that there's something above just you in this world, slogging away by the sweat off your own back. And if you take shelter of that higher power, you're in touch with something above yourself. If it's above you, it's got to at least be conscious and loving and strong, potent. And so really, just the very nature, the very idea of a higher power is ultimately personal. That there's someone looking out for you. Maybe not someone who wears a shirt and pair of pants, but someone in the sense of a conscious being that is capable of helping you. Otherwise, how could you turn your life over to something that couldn't look out for you, or couldn't help you, or couldn't assist you in any appreciable way? Why would the goal then be to turn your life over to that current, that divine current? If that divine current couldn't look out for you, or think about you, or didn't love you, or had no feeling for you, or couldn't do anything to help you. And this is why generally conceptions of God include things like omnipotence and omnibenevolence, goodness and power. Did you guys follow this? The very nature of this idea of turning your life over to something higher indicates that higher thing can help you. Well, how can something help you if it's not conscious? Why would something want to help you if it's not loving? And how could something help you if it's not powerful? In fact, that higher power can help everybody, so it must be incredibly powerful. Just for this idea of a higher power, you ultimately get to a personal, divine being that's good and loving and conscious and thoughtful and powerful. Did you guys follow this? Does that make sense? Did that make sense? Were you spacing out?
Yes.
Okay. So, both the verses I quoted had this idea. If you just approach me once and say, I'm yours, I'll take care of you. If you surrender to me, I'll cover you. I'll take care of everything. Don't worry about it. I've got you. Krishna speaks in the first person, singular. He doesn't say we will take care of you. He says, I will take care of you. The verbs are conjugated in the first person. He uses mama vratam. This is my vow. Dadami, I will give you. Moksheshami, I will liberate you. Aham, moksheshami, I will liberate you. He speaks in the first person. It's very personal. It's very intimate. You could almost say it's romantic. There's a personal commitment. It's like a marriage. Krishna's saying, you commit to me, I'll commit to you. You guys following this? Okay. Once you're in that loving, intimate relationship with Krishna, which is created by your stepping into it boldly, courageously, that then opens a door for Krishna to begin reciprocating with you intimately and personally, and he's able to help you in your life. At that point, there's a whole different thing going on. It's not just you in this world doing your duty, not being attached to the result. We've added in a new element in that you have a loving personal relationship with Krishna. And then that affects everything you do from that moment forward. Like if you have a child, your whole life changes in an instant. You're no longer you and your wife. It's you and your wife and your kid. Or you and your husband and your kid. Or you and your partner and your kid, whatever. Where's Madan? Nobody knows? Yeah. Okay. You guys following this? You've now got this active relationship. It's like having a child. Now they're just part of your thoughts automatically as you're moving through life, as you're doing things in life. The child is a part of your thoughts all the time. Or, the example given, is like if you're married, but you have a side lover, a paramour, then you're going about your duties in life all day long, but you're always trying to get away to go see your paramour and sneak off for a tryst with your paramour. And so nobody gets it, but there's this whole other thing going on in your head all the time, which is your paramour and that intimate relationship, which is this secret that nobody will share with anybody. Nobody knows about it. You kind of live a lie in this world because you've got this other thing going on. And so you're working your job, but you're thinking about when you get off work. You're going home to your family, you're thinking about when you can sneak away. You're climbing out the window. This example is used by our theologians. When you step forward into your relationship with Krishna in a powerful way, which is what those two verses talked about. This stepping into a relationship with a higher power that's going to help you because it's conscious and loving and powerful. And even if we euphemistically say the universe or this or that, we ultimately intend for the universe to have our back and look out for us and care about us. So we really conceive of the universe as being a person. The idea of a higher power being less of a person than you are is preposterous. It makes the higher power impotent and a lower power and incapable of wanting to or being able to help you. So once you step into that relationship with a higher power in a powerful way, you really give your life to Krishna. And Krishna is so magnificent. He says, if you just one time get to that place, you've opened the door for me. I can step into your life without compromising your free will. I can help you. Once you do that, you've got a paramour. You've got somebody else in your life. And you may behave in ways people can never fathom. You may martyr yourself, literally, not figuratively. You may martyr yourself for your faith. You may work up until death. You may work yourself to death. You may stand up for your faith to the point of death. When the Nawab, when the governor of Bengal, who was a Muslim, told Haridas Thakur, one of our saints who was born a Muslim, you're a Muslim, you have to chant the names of Allah. You cannot chant the names of Krishna. Then Haridas said, yes. He said, we're all chanting the same names of God. There's one sun in the sky. We call it by different names. And the Nawab said, fine, then you have to chant my names, not your names. You're a Muslim. It's disturbing our community. And Haridas said, no, Krishna reached out to me. I'm going to chant his names. And the Nawab said, I'm going to punish you. And Haridas says, you can cut me into 1,000,000 pieces. And then those 1,000,000 pieces will still chant Krishna's name. And he ordered him beaten to death. And anyway, he survived by Krishna's grace. Krishna came down from heaven and protected him. And there was a meeting of Haridas and Krishna in heaven. And Krishna told Haridas, he said, I wanted to kill all of them because they were attacking you. But you were praying for them, so I couldn't kill them. So I just took the beating on my own back so you wouldn't feel it. And Krishna showed his back to Haridas, and he had all the beat marks on his own back. This is the kind of miracle that happens in the devotee's life when they surrender to Krishna. Krishna actually steps into your life in a powerful way and takes care of you. And you experience it. And it makes you behave somewhat crazily. On one hand, you're a zealot. You'll die for your faith. Like, for sure, if you attacked our temple in Laguna Beach, and I was there, for sure I would give my life to protect our deities. Like, I'm not going to run. It's just, my time's up. I'm going to get in between you and the deities, and that's just going to be whatever's going to happen is going to happen. And I'm just typical in this regard. Devotees have been giving their lives to protect our deities for hundreds and thousands of years. Devotees behave unusually because they really love Krishna and they feel Krishna's presence in their life and they're willing to do anything for Krishna, same way you do anything for your child. Other people who don't have that relationship with Krishna, they don't get it. Just like somebody else isn't a parent, doesn't understand what it's like to have a child. But imagine if you had a child and no one knew you had a child, but they were part of your, like they were like an invisible child that was with you, that you could see but nobody else could see. Then you'd behave strangely. They wouldn't understand what you're doing because you're always accommodating for your child. And so Vaishnavas will act like fire, boldly, even giving their life. The ultimate endeavor. The endeavor that puts all other endeavors to shame. That thing that you love so much, you're willing to die for it. You live for it. And dying for something is relatively easy because it's just a quick thing. It's like, am I willing to die for you right now? Living for something is way more powerful. That includes I'm willing to die for you and I'm going to live the rest of my life for you. That's a way more powerful, way more deep level of commitment. Devotees live for Krishna. And so they will sometimes stay up all night, fast all day, work themselves to the bone. It's a very common thing. It doesn't happen so much now because I'm older and I've got students of my own. And, my students now take care of the heavy lifting, and we got many hands which make for light work. But when I was younger, when I was half my age, when I was in my 20s, my wife and I would stay up all night cooking and cleaning. And we regularly cried. We're in the kitchen, we're working 8, 10, 15, sometimes 20 plus hours. No sleep, we're fasting, it's the holy day, and we're working ourselves to the bone, and we're crying. We're in the kitchen, and we're crying. We're cleaning up the property, and we're crying because we're suffering. And I'm happy about it. I don't regret it. Best times of my life. I mean, that's not true. My life keeps getting better, but they were beautiful, romantic times in my life where I was showing Krishna how I would do anything, including working myself to the bone. I'm using myself as an example, which isn't really in my comfort zone, but I'm trying to get through to you guys, and this is the way to do it. On the other hand, if you have a relationship with Krishna, you can give things up, and you can let things go. And if Krishna wants you to let something go, you'll let everything go, including your own life, including your family, including all your money, including all your prestige and all your notoriety. Those things belong to Krishna now. And if he wants you to give them up, then you'll give them up. If there's a circumstance where that's how you show your love for Krishna, by letting go of everything, then you're willing to do that as well. Because Krishna's a person, and you have a relationship with him. And it's intimate. And it transforms your life. You're not alone anymore. Krishna's with you. Vaishnavas can understand each other because Krishna's not invisible to them. They can understand why they do what they do. They can explain to other devotees. But for other people, for people who are not involved, they can't understand it. It's like an invisible person. Maybe like somehow they seem like they're bumping into somebody, but you're like, I don't see anything there. But there is somebody there, you just can't see them. So by devotees stepping into that relationship with Krishna, Krishna reciprocates and becomes active in their life. And they're capable of doing amazing things. And they're always ready to put it down if Krishna wants them to. They're ready to stand up. They're ready to lay down. They're ready to give everything for something. And they're willing to let everything go if Krishna wants them to. And it's bewildering because they have this incredible ability to be totally renounced and totally active. And it's an incredibly unusual combination that seems contradictory until you add in this other element that they're in touch with Krishna. And then all of a sudden, everything makes sense. And when they're stepping up for Krishna. Because that's what Krishna wants from them. Because that's how they can serve Krishna in that moment. And when they let everything go, that's their time to do that. And you can't figure it out because everybody else is acting out of self-interest or an extended sense of self for their community. But then you get these devotees and they're like these idiot savants where it does not compute and it'll break your mind and you can never understand it. Because they're intoxicated. They're like intoxicated. They've drunk this elixir of love for Krishna, which changes the world they live in. And they dance and they cry and they're happy and they're sad and they're crying out to Krishna in great sadness, but it's actually great ecstasy. And it's very, very difficult from the outside to lick that bottle of honey and understand what honey tastes like. We can frame it out. It makes sense. It's logical. It's coherent. We can flesh it out. We can unpack it. But the way to actually understand it is to step into that relationship yourself. The next time we do kirtan, which will be now, just cry out with full abandon. Cry out to Krishna. Open your heart up. Watch what happens. Far out stuff happens. And you make a habit out of that, far out stuff keeps happening. Amazing stuff. I like the direction you were going in. You're moving with grace. That's why I liked it. I like the direction you were going. I can't remember exactly what you said, but you were picking up on what she said and fleshing it out more. And there was this idea that there was this Krsna Factor. And so that you added that. That's why I felt like you got it. And you were in the same universe. And so I liked what all of you said. I liked what everybody said, but I especially felt that the three of you started to get to the heart of this idea, which I've now tried to flesh out for you. That's what I got. Thank you very much, IGTV.